I'm Corinne Lesh with EdScoop, and I'm here with Tom Ryan, CEO of eLearn Institute. Hi,
Yes.
Tom.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks for being here. So tell us a little bit about your role and what eLearn does.
Well, I'm the CEO, and it's a nonprofit that I started after I retired from public education. And it actually came about because I had a lot of my peers across the country that were saying, hey, now that you have some time, could you help me? It's kind of the feet on the ground and making the shift to digital. So sometimes it's mentorship, sometimes it's can you come in and do a review of our program and provide some recommendations of how to move forward. And other times it's could you come in and talk to our leadership about what's the future hold and where do we go from here. So I have an opportunity to visit school districts and do these reviews, which gets me the underside. You go to conferences to see the polished version of what they're doing,
Right.
but they don't usually say, well, here's where we stumbled. And one of the things about COSIN's conference, they have that fail fest where you can talk about what did I learn from this problem. You probably learn more from that than from the successes. So having an opportunity to see schools from Rochester to Los Angeles gives me an opportunity to share the successes and the challenges that each school district's facing as they shift from kind of an old model of education to whatever that new model is going to look like.
Right. And so what are some maybe examples that come to mind of what you've seen in school districts that you've visited?
Well, Houston is an independent school district. So this is a system that has schools that have their funding and they make their own decisions. They're independent of each other. Boston is a similar model where kids might even have different graduation requirements depending on what high school they go to. They've got models and implementation strategies that have to be really focused on that individual school. Houston's done some really good things on their power up model of how it isn't about the technology, it's around teaching and learning, but in an environment that really supports those efforts. That they're doing some really impressive things. Orange County in Florida, the chief operations officer and the chief academic officer got together and said, I'm going to not just communicate, I'm going to go to your meetings to find out really what your issues are, and you go to mine. And then let's build a plan that moves us forward, as opposed to, here's where we want to go, how are you going to help us get there? You weren't there at the strategic implementation of that. So they're doing some really interesting things in Orange County. Like, I was working with the Phoenix Catholic high schools, and they had a grant to really upgrade. They brought all of their schools up to a standard of network connectivity, and then adopted a learning management system to really start to make that shift in their classes. So we're going to build the environment to make sure that you can be successful with this blended learning initiative. And then they created all of their classes in that online environment. They're using assessment tools and increasing dialogue and collaboration with students and teachers and expanding that school day. So they're doing some very impressive things also.
Great. And you mentioned that you were also a teacher. Where were you a teacher?
I was a high school teacher. I was a high school principal, and then finished the last 11 years as the chief information officer for the school district.
And how did you sort of integrate technology or blended learning programs when you were on the teaching side?
Well, when I was on the teaching side, my wife actually, who's a French teacher, started getting into this program that connected different countries together through technology and sharing what they were doing in their classrooms. And they were really countries that might have been in conflict. So the governments might have been in conflict, but the people of the country, how do we understand each other kind of a thing. So seeing some of the things they were doing and some of the tools they're using, I thought, well, I could use that myself. And it was more around organization and access, trying to make my life more efficient or effective in what I did as opposed to transforming practice into something new. But when I got into administration, I took those same tool sets that I used and started saying, this administrative stuff is just crazy. It's all still on paper. And so I was able to transfer some of those and then start working with other principals on, which then started to transform our practice, which then led the superintendent to say, I want you to take over instructional technology and do this. And that wasn't necessarily the path that I wanted to be on, but it was a path that my boss decided I was going to take.
Okay, when you're also on the board of COSIN, right? So what sort of issues do you see, pressing issues for COSIN's membership right now?
Well, we're still trying to get our head wrapped around with our business partners on the privacy component, where what do we do with this data? And just because you have access to it doesn't mean you should. And how do we protect that? And what's the teacher's role in that? What's a student? What's a parent? We're also right now struggling with security. We haven't been looking at ourselves like national labs in the past, and now with the growth in phishing, the ransomware thing that came out, COSIN was right on top of that because we're listening to our members, giving them best practices. We've already had school districts that have been impacted by this ransomware kind of thing. So being able to have very practical recommendations on how to protect yourself, what do you do if you're there, online assessments, we started getting DDoS attacks, lots of times perpetrated by the kids. In fact, we found out you can buy them online for the price of a cup of coffee kind of a thing, and bring down your school's network. So now all of a sudden we're having to look at security, network security in a way that we haven't been used to looking at it because it hasn't been. I mean, who wants to bring down a school network? Well, now there's lots of people. So that's a shift in what we're doing. And I think also this technology could have been something that's been on the side before. Now as we look at differentiating, personalizing our instruction to kids, trying to make that one-on-one, that teacher-to-student interaction richer and more beneficial to a student, that is causing us to have to look at systems, building this environment again for teaching and learning that is robust and transparent enough that it doesn't get into the... So I've got to teach you the technology and then you can be personalizing your instruction. It should be transparent enough that all we're worried about is personalizing that instruction, really reaching in and addressing the needs of the student, where that student's at, and being able to do that, which then gets into the one other that I'll mention is this equity piece. COSIN has really taken a lead on equity. It starts out with equity and access, and we know that kids that have access to instructional resources at home are going to do better than those kids that don't. That summer school drop-off in grades is evidence of that kind of a thing. So how do we make sure that we start thinking about equity, kids having access to great teaching and learning throughout the day when the kids are at home or wherever they might be? In the 1400s, we created the printing press, and that transformed the way we learn. All of a sudden, everybody had access to a book. That was the first one-to-one. We've been debating on whether we should have a computer or not for one-to-one. Well, we've been doing one-to-one, giving kids access to content for hundreds of years. We're just talking about changing the technology that provides that access. And now with the reduction in costs, the increase of the networks, and the increase in the digital resources that are available, it becomes critical for school district leadership to start planning, how do we assure kids have access at home? That doesn't mean the school district has to pay. There's state programs, federal programs, city programs, and resources that have already been developed, maybe in the higher ed community, that if we partner with, can really expand access. And that's, I think, another cutting edge kind of a thing. How do we make sure that all kids have access to great resources?
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Tom. We really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Corinne Lesh with EdScoop. Thanks for watching.